For me, the question became, how do you measure something so tangible, something that decades of military psychologists hadn't been able to quantify, something those very successful people I'd interviewed said they could recognize on sight, but couldn't think of how to directly test for. I sat down and looked over my interview notes, and I started writing questions that captured sometimes verbatim descriptions of what it means to have grit. Half of the questions were about perseverance. They asked how much you agree with the statements like, I have overcome setbacks to conquer an important challenge, and I finish whatever I begin. The other half of the questions were about passion. They asked whether your interests change from year to year and the extent to which you have been obsessed with certain idea or project for a short time but later lost interest. What emerged was the grit scale, a test that, when taken honestly, measures the extent to which you approach life with grit. In July 2004, on the second day of Beast, 1218 West Point cadets sat down to take the grit scale. The day before, cadets had said goodbye to their moms and dads, a farewell for which West Point allocates exactly 90 seconds. Gotten their heads shaved, just the men, changed out of civilian clothing into the famous grey and white West Point uniform, and received their footlockers, helmets, and other gear. Though they may have mistakenly thought they already knew how, they were instructed by a fourth year cadet in the proper way to stand in line, step up to my line, not on my line, not over my line, not behind my line, step up to my line. Initially, I looked to see how grit scores lined up with aptitude. Guess what? Grit scores bore absolutely no relationship to the whole candidate scores that had been so painstakingly calculated during the admissions process. In other words, how talented a cadet was had nothing about their grit and vice versa. The separation of grit from talent was consistent with Mike's observations of Air Force training. But when I first stumbled onto this finding, it came as a real surprise. After all, why shouldn't the talented endure? Logically, the talented should stick around and try hard, because when they do phenomenally well. At West Point, for example, among cadets who ultimately make it through Beast, the whole candidate score is a marvelous predictor of every metric. West Point tracks. It only predicts academic grades. It not only predicts academic grades but military and physically fitness marks as well. So it's surprising, really, that talent is no guarantee to grit. In this book, we will explore the reasons why.